welcome to You Bought What? I'm Dr. Dan Krawczyk, a professor and brain researcher, and I'm interested in the problem of how we set values on things and just talking to a variety of people from society about interesting investments they've made, things that they bought that undergo all kinds of complex and interesting stories. So today we're going to talk about a very timely topic, real estate and office space, which is radically changing here in the year 2020. I'm going to talk today with Tim Slaughter, who's an entrepreneur and manager of large office spaces in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And Tim, welcome to You Bought What?
Thanks, Dan. Glad to be with you. So I started out not being a real estate person at all and just kind of a management consultant technology person until the technology bubble burst in 2002. But I found myself in commercial real estate for what you just described. I like the tangible aspect of it, being able to walk through a building, walk through the asset that you're purchasing, and be able to point something to your kids and to your grandkids. And there's something there, every Christmas and Thanksgiving when the family would come to town, as I got more involved in this industry, was spent driving to buildings we were working on or driving through construction sites, or, pointing, doing tours. So there's just something to it that you can sink your teeth in. And the other thing that you and I talked about, Dan, is a lot of us own houses or condos or something else like that. So we all have a frame of reference, and we dwell in real estate. We work in real estate all the time. So we should all have some passing knowledge of it. So but yeah, my background, we started a company in 2009, basically because I got laid off in a real estate job that was development oriented, and in the recession you don't do a lot of development typically. And so 2009 we made about $1,000 and tried to figure out what to do in real estate. We ended up buying an office building in East Dallas, and over the course of the last 11 years we've purchased 24 different office buildings worth about $295 million in value and returned about a 28% IRR to our investors. So had a really good run, but we've also, we started a business at the exact right time at the beginning of a recession, and we're able to buy things relatively cheaply and sell them relatively expensively. So anyway, that's kind of, my background. I've got two other partners that, I wouldn't be in business without them. They coaxed me into the business, and so the three of us are the owners of Caddo Holdings and two other affiliated companies. But we've made our livings buying office buildings basically over these last 11 years, and that's starting to change now with people rethinking everything about coming into the office and how they work and how they collaborate. This call is a great example of what the kind of things we're doing now. So Why do we even need office space?
Well, what an interesting period of time to have gotten into this right after a recession, seeing incredible changes in value, weathering through that and getting some seasoned lessons undoubtedly in your early days there. And now we come to 2020, where everyone is thinking about the future of office work. So we wanted to talk today about one of your recent acquisitions, Jaeger Properties, and tell us about that story, how you went into that investment and how it changed on you.
Right. So the idea this investment was brought to us by one of our investors, which was great. We actually, a lot of our most recent investments we've done through our kind of friends and family and small family office networks. But what we'd seen over sort of an 11-year period is we really did well with small businesses in our building. So we would take like a full floor of a building and break it down into 2 to 5 person offices, and lease those 2 to 5 person offices much faster than we would trying to lease 20,000 square foot, go elephant hunting for one big tenant. And and we happened upon that through a flood. I don't think we have time. I can tell that story, but we basically, backed into this idea that, if we cut up these larger spaces into smaller spaces and served an underserved part of the business community, which was small business, then we did well. We leased faster. The tenants stayed longer. They were more loyal. And so we really found our niche in serving that smaller business, and particularly the smaller businesses that were located in neighborhood, that were adjacent to where people live. So we were introduced to a guy named Scott Yeager, who 18 years ago had started building basically small single office spaces for small businesses and entrepreneurs up in Indianapolis, basically out of a credibility problem. He was a general contractor, and he was going to meet with some of his clients, and they wanted to come to his office, but he didn't have an office. He was working out of his garage. And so he bought a building and fitted out the first floor with a conference room and some offices, and had his friends show up whenever the client came to town for meetings. And they were like, "Hey, we kind of like this place that you've built, this office space. Would you lease us our office that we're hanging out in?" And so this whole concept was born. And so we find that this it's kind of the WeWork, shared office co-working model, but it's heavily neighborhood focused and heavily private office focused. It's kind of our niche. And we found we're not naturally, super risky guys. We'd always buy an existing building that was like 60% leased, take it to 90 or 95% leased. So we thought, buying someone else's business model that had been successful for 18 years made a lot more sense than trying to, from the ground up, try to build a new business model and reverse engineer someone else's concept. So that's kind of how we got into this business. It was pretty similar. The customer we were serving was kind of similar to what we were seeing before, but it was different in enough ways that it created value for us, that these assets weren't sought after by a bunch of people necessarily because they're operationally intensive. There's a bunch of tenants. It's kind of hard to understand, and it doesn't exactly fit an office building. It doesn't fit an apartment building. It doesn't fit self-storage, but it's got some components of each of those things. So
a lot of comparisons you could make, and it sounds like it was a very stable model. It had been proven out. So 2020 comes along. What happens next?
So 2020 comes along, and we have shelter-in-place orders that go into effect in Dallas, and then that bleeds over to Collin County, where our assets are. And essentially, the business model is super flexible. So we didn't have none of the tenants, or we call them members, but none of our members had any term on their leases. That's by design. It's a flexible concept. But 60 days notice, we could have had, we have over 400 members. They could have all been gone in 60 days. And so what we did see is over the course of how this played out through the summers, we lost about 200 members of like 415. But what we also found is we were able to replace about 125 of them through that period. And so the tremendous thing about this particular recession, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, is it's remarkable in that there's a lot more new businesses being formed in this recession than there were in 2009 and 2010. It's like 40% higher than it was then. And I don't know how to explain that. Maybe technology has enabled part of that, or maybe just the idea of working from home and bootstrapping something is less daunting, or the cloud. I don't know, but we're just seeing a lot of new business formation, and that's helping us. And the pandemic has created some winners, as far as there's types of businesses that have done very well, like janitorial companies or mortgage brokers. We have a lot of realtors with interest rates at historic lows, people needing to right size and do a new house with a home office. So we've been able to capture some of that adaptation of the economy real time, which is pretty interesting, but also I wouldn't recommend. I mean, it's a bumpy ride, but we feel pretty confident that we're in the right business model, right neighborhood. Having the private offices with four walls and a door from a pandemic safety standpoint has been really favorable.
I've noticed there's all kinds of comparisons you've made. I've heard you compare things to a flood. You're going after one big elephant. It's a bumpy road. And I think that's one of the major themes that we cope with. So I'm going to introduce another comparison here to try to summarize what's happened. So you've got this very stable investment property. You have a very clear roadmap that's been working before. The symptoms of the new situation are a curveball is thrown. So you're at the plate, you're expecting a nice juicy pitch right down the middle, and it is a curveball in the form of a really unexpected context. And furthermore, that results in the realization that what has worked previously is now not going to work anymore. So at that point, the world has shifted on you and it's time to refocus energies. So I think analogies are a great theme for today. We've both used a variety of them just to describe this. As a brain researcher, I wanted to just give a little bit of insight into how we use analogies. This is an area of interest of mine, reasoning by analogy. When we can make good comparisons to other situations, we can borrow insights from things we already know about, saving a lot of time and effort. At the level of the brain, the frontal lobes right up here are the key to analogies. They basically set the context for our current situation. And through frontal networks, we appreciate how things look right now. And then we can grab pre-existing prior associations from our temporal lobes at the very back of the brain here. So it's a network. It's much like Zoom networks that we're communicating with right now. To make just yet another crazy analogy within an analogy, our brain to this conversation. So
it's meta, very meta.
Yeah, very meta. So your frontal lobes are about selecting the right comparisons to try to find a way forward in the future. So how have you tried to focus differently to cope with this curveball?
Yeah, I mean it's impacted I mean, I think the kind of the silver lining in all of it is when you inherit a business that's already running well and it's new to you and you haven't been through any kind of stress with it, it's easy to become complacent or coast, and we have not had that benefit. And so, for our buildings, we typically were churning 5 to 7 members a month at each location. So our marketing efforts only needed to keep up with that level of churn. And, then in several buildings, we had like 20, 30% giving us notice of the building that they were moving out in 60 days. And so you really had to look at it with a fresh lens. Like any marketing efforts that are designed to get you 5 to 7 new leases a month are not adequate if you need 25 new leases a month. And so I'm really thankful for that because, the other thing that we were really afraid of is, we wanted to preserve this 18-year-old business model. My mantra the first 6 months was don't screw anything up because it had a profit, we had profits dropping to the bottom line. We were making distributions to our investors. And so it's just like, don't mess this up. You've got the golden goose, hold on to it. And the good thing about the curveball was it made us, kind of pick our heads up and challenge, okay, if we keep doing it this way, we can see what the result's going to be. I mean, if we keep only signing 5 or 7 new leases a month, it's not going to get us where we need to be on this investment. And so it's really the curveball, the blessing in it all is just having to rethink what we're doing, having to ask all the questions all over again. And that has been tremendously helpful for us. And so we're hoping that we're kind of taking the old model and all the best parts of it we're preserving, but then we're also building kind of some new pieces to it that are going to make this machine going forward that has adapted to a post-pandemic, post-recession environment, a new way of working, where people, want to get their work done and be home for dinner. They want the work-life balance, and if you're in a building that's close to your neighborhood, close to your grocery store, close to your kid's school, then you just need a place to go get work done and so you can get back to the rest of your life. I think we're going to fit very well in that world, and that's where we want to be. So.
Yeah, focusing on the new mechanics of the way the situation is going to play out. Another question related, how do you rebrand? So we talked a little about having to go with kind of a rebranding strategy that communicates this pivoting to the outside world. Can you talk about how your rebrand has gone?
Yeah, well, I think I'm not a marketing guy. I'm an analyst. I'm an MBA. I deal with spreadsheets and numbers. So, I don't naturally think this way. So I've gotten to talk to a lot of people, but I think what you've got to really understand very well is kind of what problems are you solving for the customer, and make sure that whatever new brand story that you're telling aligns very well with those problems that you're solving. And so for us, the core issues that I think our customers have as small business owners, and why they come to us is that credibility factor. So not being able to, not having to work out of your garage or on your kitchen table, the balance factor. So especially now with kids, needing help from their parents to be schooled at home and all that kind of stuff, being, parents are sharing time, schooling their kids. So, being close to the office is very important. And then just the safety part, just from a pandemic perspective, being physically separate from other people while you're working, and only around the people that you choose to be around, and the rest of the time being safe when you're in common areas. So those were kind of the key problems that we felt like we were solving in branding. So if we can uncover that first, and then, the branding aspects of a logo and a name and all that stuff, if it doesn't support the solutions to the problems, it's no good. I mean, you and I talked previously about Dyson, the Dyson vacuum cleaner, the inventor, I think his name's James Dyson. He's a billionaire now, but he just wanted a vacuum cleaner that sucked harder, basically.
Right.
And
Get down.
so that's kind of, it's interesting that, he kind of took a very passionate approach. Now, his products are highly functional, but they're also beautiful. So, it's hard to say that he's prioritized function over form, but I think they really have. And that's something that we're kind of going after. And the other analogy is, we want to be, more steak, less sizzle, like the WeWorks of the world. There was a lot of sizzle with that, a lot of really cool design, a lot of, glassed in boxes that you could look across a sea of people who are working, and entrepreneurs, and, interesting nap pods and chairs and ping pong tables and stuff like that. A lot of sizzle, but we want to be on the other end of the spectrum where it's more about the steak. It's more about getting your work done. Now, we're going to provide some aspects of the sizzle. Our designs are really cool, and we like to, there's a bit of whimsy or eccentricity in them, but at the end of the day, if the office space isn't functional, if your Wi-Fi doesn't work, if there aren't plugs on every wall, if there aren't, kind of best practice COVID safety measures in place, it's just not going to work. And so we're looking to provide something highly functional, affordable, and, flexible for people to, be able to, if I need to add an office because my small business is growing, I just email the building manager and add one, or if I need to take one away, it's a 60-day out. And so it's highly functional in that way. And I think that's where we're trying to land with our rebranding efforts. Hey, we are cool, but we're also in Plano, Texas, Allen, McKinney. We're in suburban markets, but we're cool. But we're not so cool that you're intimidated. You or your customers will be intimidated to walk in. You'll feel proud to be a part of this environment, but it's a highly productive environment. So that's where we want to position ourselves.
Yeah, we've thought a lot about, as a society, these open space concept kind of plans, and those just aren't compatible with this curveball that the world's been thrown. We have to now think about segregating and maybe using stairs and not elevators, and kind of being able to actually work independently. So getting back to the frontal lobes, one can't help but compare this to your house. So we've had to think about home offices a lot more, and soundproofing, and what do you do if you have a dog that's barking incessantly during your Zoom calls? And we've all had to cope with that. So that's another comparison that comes to mind with the way that you're coping with this Jaeger situation.
Yeah, it's you're 100% right. And sound and indoor air quality are two areas that we're diving very deep into right now, and talking to a lot of experts on, how do you maintain true, voice privacy between units that are next door to each other, and then how do you, keep the air as clean as possible. So those are two biggies right now.
Yeah, sounds like a really agile way forward. All right, so we'll wrap up here. Tim is right at the focal point of some of these huge changes going on with pandemic situation. His symptoms today were he was thrown a curveball. unexpected change of context. What had been working previously was clearly not going to work now. Ultimately, the world had shifted and it required some refocusing of energy. Some of the remedies are focus on the fundamentals, much like the Dyson vacuum. You just wanted to suck harder. In this case, you wanted to suck less. And essentially, thinking about those important COVID-19 related kind of concerns is important. Also finding good comparisons, using your frontal lobes, connecting with the back of the brain regions to compare this business model to other potential business models can be really interesting. Tim is going for the steak, not the sizzle. And we can use those kind of analogies to chart a new path forward. Tim Slaughter, thank you so much for joining me on this conversation. Fascinating topic, and we look forward to seeing how all of your interesting innovations work out in these situations.
Thank you.
Once again, I'm Dan Krawczyk, and I am hosting You Bought What, a show about investments, acquisitions, properties, anything with value. So get in touch. We welcome your comments and any ideas you have for future episodes. Dan Krawczyk, a brain researcher and professor, and we'll be talking values in the future. Thanks for joining us.